Welcome back to CIA Declassified. As we navigate the modern era and the complex geopolitical climate, the lines between state power and private enterprise have never been more blurred. In the early 2000s, the agency faced a crisis: how to project power in denied areas without the political fallout of American boots on the ground. The answer was a radical shift in policy. They didn't just hire guards, they outsourced the front lines. Today, we look at the contractors who became the agency's invisible fist in the war on terror, operating under a veil of corporate secrecy that even Congress struggled to pierce. Today, we examine the machinery of privatized warfare. We are looking at a program that turned corporate entities into paramilitary extensions of the Directorate of Operations. This was the private force multiplication policy known as GREYSTONE. How did this program get its name? The designation Greystone was chosen as a reference to the gray zone of international law, the space where private contractors operate outside the traditional chain of command but under the direction of the state. It was a literal nod to the stone wall of plausible deniability that these contractors provided to their agency handlers. If an operation went south, the agency could point to a contract rather than a commission, effectively creating a stone barrier between the White House and the battlefield. Greystone transformed the agency from a collection of spies into a manager of mercenaries. The program was established in the immediate aftermath of the September 11th attacks to provide quick reaction forces in environments where the U.S. military presence was restricted. A quote from a declassified 2004 contract summary: contracted assets provide a scalable and expendable operational capability that does not count against official troop ceilings. End quote. Greystone utilized personnel from Blackwater, USA, providing them with statement of work orders that included high threat protection and offensive snatch and grab operations. The program was designated as a Special Activities Center Support Initiative, allowing private individuals to take part in covert action, usually reserved for sworn officers. A quote from Cofer Black, a former CIA counterterrorism chief: the goal was to have a private army that could go into places where the regular military would be a provocation. End quote. Records indicate that Greystone operated out of a secret facility in Moyoak, North Carolina, where contractors were vetted for high sensitivity agency tasks. The program utilized shell corporations to pay contractor invoices, ensuring that the paper trail for paramilitary operations never led directly back to the agency's main budget. Logs confirm that Greystone contractors were granted top secret clearances specifically to operate within agency safe houses in Kabul and Baghdad. The program implemented the Personal Services Contract (PSC) model, which allowed the agency to treat individual contractors as if they were staff officers while denying them staff benefits. Internal memos describe the Liaison Integration Protocol, where private contractors were embedded directly into agency global response staff teams. Technical logs confirm that Greystone assets were used to secure black sites, the secret prisons used for the agency's rendition, detention, and interrogation program. Documentation reveals that Greystone contractors were often retired Tier 1 operators, such as Navy SEALs and Delta Force members who were paid up to $1,000 a day. The program utilized technical service agreements to hire private pilots for the agency's secret air fleet, known as Tepper Aviation. Reports describe the contractor shield, a legal theory developed by agency lawyers to argue that private contractors were not subject to the same congressional oversight as government employees. The program developed rapid deployment packages where a private company could have 50 armed men in any country on Earth within 48 hours of an agency phone call. Records show that Greystone was the primary vehicle for the agency's assassination program during the mid-2000s, though it was reportedly never fully operationalized. Agency researchers identified that market-based paramilitaries were more cost-effective for short-term surges than maintaining a standing agency paramilitary force. The operation successfully utilized logistics fronts to move weapons and equipment into conflict zones under the guise of private security supplies. Internal CIA memos confirm that Greystone was used to provide security for the agency's deep cover assets in environments like Libya and Yemen. The project utilized proprietary aircraft registered to private companies to fly contractors into denied airspace without triggering diplomatic incidents. Documentation proves that the agency utilized insurmountable liability waivers to protect themselves if a contractor was killed or captured. Logs mentioned the use of third country nationals, TCNs, hiring soldiers from Chile or Fiji to further muddy the national origin of the force. The program influenced the Goldwater-Nichols era of military contractor integration. Records indicate that Greystone was a primary tool for the surge in Iraq, providing the bulk of the security for agency stations outside the Green Zone. Technical logs describe the total denial framework, where contractors were instructed to never carry any ID linking them to the U.S. government. The agency maintained a contractor roster of over 2,000 individuals ready for off-the-books deployment at any time. A quote from a declassified 2007 congressional testimony: "We are using private citizens to do the work that we used to believe only the government had the moral authority to do." End quote. Documentation shows that Greystone managers often had dual-hatted roles, serving as both company executives and agency contracting officer representatives. The project developed encrypted commercial radios to allow contractors to communicate without using military frequency equipment that could be traced. Logs confirm that the agency used In-Q-Tel to invest in companies that provided the specific tactical gear used by Greystone teams. The program proved that economic warfare could include the hiring of local militias to provide security for agency-funded infrastructure projects. Internal reports describe the blowback risk, acknowledging that training private armies could eventually lead to those same armies working for the highest bidder. Project records confirm that Greystone data was used to create the Contractor Deployment Database, CDD, used by the Pentagon today. The agency utilized private intelligence networks, PINs, where contractors would gather local human intelligence and sell it back to the agency. A quote from a declassified 2005 operational summary: "The contract is the mission is the contract." End quote. Greystone technicians utilized remote armories and shipping containers placed in strategic ports around the Mediterranean. The project maintained safe harbor clauses in contracts to ensure that contractors captured abroad would be treated as unlawful combatants rather than POWs. Documentation reveals the use of direct action teams comprised entirely of foreign contractors to conduct raids on high-value targets. The agency monitored the financial health of their primary contractors to ensure no foreign power could buy out the agency's private army. Records show Greystone money was used to build private training camps in the African Sahel for local counter-terror units. The project utilized dark site transfers, moving detainees between countries using private jets to avoid public airport manifest. Internal memos describe the use of proprietary logistics where food, water, and ammo for agency teams were delivered by local commercial trucks to blend in. A quote from a declassified 2009 intelligence review: "The privatization of intelligence is a bell that cannot be unrung." End quote. Greystone provided the security envelope for the agency's largest ever field operation in Afghanistan. The program used corporate bounties to incentivize contractors to capture specific documents or hardware during raids. Documentation confirms that Greystone sensors were placed in private shipping containers to monitor global trade routes for nuclear material. The project utilized non-disclosure agreements that carried the threat of life imprisonment if a contractor spoke about agency work. Logs show that the agency tracked the loyalty index of former contractors who went to work for foreign governments. The agency maintained a global contractor net, identifying the best private military companies for specific regional conflicts. Internal reports show Greystone funds were used to buy non-standard vehicles, Toyotas and Land Rovers, to allow teams to operate without looking like the U.S. military. The project used private satellite imagery to plan raids, ensuring the agency didn't have to use limited military satellite time. Records show the CIA used Greystone to monitor the security vulnerabilities of private oil infrastructure in the Middle East. The program established logistics hubs in Dubai that were managed entirely by private military companies. The agency recorded the tactical performance of contractors in combat using the data to refine training for agency staff officers. Technicians used private encryption keys to secure communication between agency safe houses and contractor-led convoys. The program intercepted the communication metadata of rival private security firms to ensure the agency's contractors had the competitive edge. CIA files show that Greystone utilized bait operations, using private contractors as targets to draw out insurgent cells for drone strikes. The project employed risk actuaries from the insurance industry to calculate the cost of life for operations in high-threat zones. Operational logs confirm the deployment of private drones that were launched and recovered by contractors, keeping the agency's hands off of the controls. The program identified the corruption networks of foreign governments by tracking who private contractors were paying for local access fees. Records show that Greystone sensors were integrated into private security cameras in foreign capitals to provide the agency with a secret citywide watch. Technicians developed a specialized contractor radio burst that would self-destruct if the equipment was opened by unauthorized personnel. The agency mapped the contractor ecosystem of the world, knowing exactly which company owned which assets in every major conflict zone. Memos describe the use of contractor liaison officers inside the Pentagon to ensure the agency and military weren't hiring the same people for conflicting missions. Greystone successfully tracked the movement of illicit arms dealers by embedding contractors within the private security details of the dealers themselves. Project documentation reveals that specific private islands in the Pacific were used as training grounds for sea-based paramilitary teams. The CIA's Inspector General reported that the agency lacked enough staff to monitor the massive influx of Greystone contractors in 2008. Greystone contractors were exempted from the Uniform Code of Military Justice, creating a massive legal loophole for off-duty conduct. A quote from a Declassified 2011 oversight memo. The line between a government function and a corporate service has become indistinguishable in the Greystone framework. End quote. Agency logs confirm that private contractors operated drone-based security in countries where the host nation officially banned the U.S. military. The program utilized incentive fees to reward private companies for achieving high-risk intelligence objectives on a tight schedule. Records show that Greystone contractors were embedded in local police forces in several war-torn capitals to act as the agency's eyes and ears. The program spent over $300 million on deniable transport alone between 2002 and 2005. Historical audits show that Greystone was the blueprint for the current multi-billion-dollar private intelligence industry. Contractors maintained the life support systems, water, food, and power for the agency's most sensitive overseas listening post. The agency utilized contractors to scrub digital trails of agency officers who were forced to flee hostile nations during political upheavals. Documentation proves that contractors were used to shadow train foreign leaders, personal bodyguards, as a way of gaining internal access. The GREYSTONE project created a private satellite backbone for agency communications that was completely independent of military networks. Logs show that contractors managed the vetting stations for local informants in the Green Zone of Baghdad. When we dig into the declassified GREYSTONE files, we encounter a silence that is as chilling as it is absolute. The thickest layers of black ink occur in a folder labeled Operational Appendix Liquidation Delta 4. This section holds the record for the most dense redactions regarding extrajudicial contractor actions in the entire archive. Entire chapters are blacked out where the agency describes the termination protocols for rogue contractors. Why is the process for cleaning up a private army still a top-tier secret? Behind closed doors in D.C., the Whisper Network has long buzzed about Eric Prince's personal relationship with the agency's top brass. Some former insiders gossip that GREYSTONE wasn't just a program, but a private club where Prince and Buzzy Krongard, the agency's then executive director, cut deals over drinks. The rumor is that Blackwater wasn't just a contractor, it was a brotherhood that allowed the agency to bypass the messy oversight of the State Department. There is a persistent dark theory among investigators that liquidation in the Delta IV files doesn't refer to assets, but to people. Some speculate that these redactions hide the executive action protocols used to permanently silence contractors who became liabilities. The chatter in the deep state underground suggests the agency maintains a ghost budget specifically for these cleanup jobs, ensuring that what happens in a black site stays in a black site. In the world of veteran contractor forums, a chilling story circulates about the list. The theory claims that the Delta IV redactions cover a list of American citizens, rogue contractors, and whistleblowers who were marked for neutralization under the GREYSTONE framework. It's a terrifying thought that the same men hired to hunt al-Qaeda were eventually turned back toward their own ranks to keep the secrets of the program from leaking to the press. Was GREYSTONE a success? Tactically, it was a force multiplier triumph. It achieved the primary objective of expanding the agency's physical reach without a corresponding increase in the number of official blue badge officers. Strategically, it was a foundation of modern warfare. It proved that the state's monopoly on violence is a flexible concept that can be leased. The project was a success because it allowed the agency to operate in denied areas with a level of agility that the traditional military could never match. It successfully demonstrated that commercial plausibility is the most effective form of cover. The program successfully birthed the modern deniable security architecture doctrine. It was a success that fundamentally altered the way the agency views human capital. Furthermore, it proved that the global market for tactical expertise can be weaponized as a permanent shadow army. The operation was a success because it made the small footprint operation the standard for the 21st century. It validated the idea that if you have the budget, you can bypass any political restriction on troop deployment. The operation was a success because it gave the agency the plausible exit strategy for every failed intervention. It successfully turned the soldier of fortune into a contractor of the state. This success paved the way for the current global network of security consultants that function with 100% reliability. It turned the chaos of the battlefield into a managed service agreement that can never be fully canceled. The program's ultimate success lies in the fact that it made the very idea of national responsibility an optional feature of war. From an organizational standpoint, it was an unparalleled victory in resource management, allowing for the rapid scaling of violence without the friction of bureaucracy. It established a model of expendable expertise that has become the gold standard for shadow operations globally. Ultimately, Greystone was a success because it showed that even in the most lawless zones, the agency is the one who owns the contract. It proved that in the 21st century, the most effective army is the one you can simply dissolve once the mission is over. This ghost military model is now the undisputed blueprint for every superpower on the planet. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, the sold shadow led to quite a few, like scalable paramilitary outsourcing. The contractor roster of the 2000s evolved into algorithmic security staffing, where AI now matches tactical experts to global hotspots in real time based on their success metrics. Shell Corporation financial routing. The logistics front's techniques led to current blockchain operational funding, allowing intelligence services to pay field assets in untraceable digital tender that bypasses international banking sanctions. Proprietary denial cover systems. The statement of work models are now used in corporate intelligence integration, where private companies handle the bulk of national cyber defense under secret government service level agreements. And advanced vetting algorithms. The high sensitivity vetting developed for Greystone is used today in predictive insider threat software to monitor the loyalty of employees in the world's most sensitive tech firms. Greystone reminds us that there is no such thing as a public war in a world of privatized power. When you see a security consultant or a private protection detail, remember the sold shadow. The agency understood long ago that a uniform is a liability and a contract is an asset. You are living in a world where the hand that pulls the trigger is often connected to a corporate bank account rather than a national capital. The clack of the rifle is now the sound of a managed service delivery, and the whir of the phone is the heartbeat of a global security industry that never sleeps. Every operation is a line item, and every conflict is just a market waiting to be served. We are all just observers of a world where the most important battles are fought by people whose names are redacted in a ledger that reaches deep into the corporate shadow. The contract has eyes, and the shadow has a price that never goes down. Even the most patriotic duty is a commodity if you have the right budget. In the cold light of the gray zone, the agency is always the one holding the pen. Trust the state to protect you, but never trust them to admit who they hired to do it. Your safety is a deliverable in a contract that has no expiration date. The world itself has been leased to the highest bidder in the name of security. The privatization of consequence has created a landscape where the state is merely a client in its own defense. Every secret mission is now a corporate secret protected by the laws of trade as much as the laws of treason. In 2026, we are no longer citizens of a country so much as we are stakeholders in a global security venture. The final declassification of our time may simply be the realization that the government is just the middleman for the shadows. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and remember, the shadow you see might be the one you're paying for. Join us next time as we examine muscular and the hidden infrastructures of the internet. The NSA and GCHQ found a way to listen to the giants. We'll uncover the secrets of muscular, the secret tapping of fiber optic links between Google and Yahoo data centers, This program, designated as a special source operations access point, proved that your data is never truly at risk. Join us next time for the Prism Breaker. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.